Hello and welcome to another episode of StratoCast. It's Stuart, StratoCast Level 3 here, and we're doing our second part of our construction of infantry video, where we're looking at constructing advanced and experimental infantry. And we're going to straight away flip the switch here. So we're going to go from tech level standard to tech level advanced. That doesn't mean, by the way, it's a more advanced tech level. It means it's more advanced rules. So it doesn't mean that the weapons are more advanced, it just means that there are more options. Commonly mistaken that people think tech level means the degree of the advancement of the weapons. It's not actually, it's really just more a degree of advancement of the rules. Anything that's standard tech will be in Total Warfare and Tech Manual. You need those two books, and mostly in Battle Mech Manual if you're using just Battle Mechs, but really Total Warfare and Tech Manual, whereas the Advanced is referring to anything in TACOps Advanced Rules or TACOps Advanced Units and Equipment. So we now have our rules level set to Advanced, and we get a few more different options here. And the first option we get is kits, so armor kits. So we can actually add different versions of armor now. And really, again, a lot of this is for fluff purposes, but there is an armor divider here of 2. Now, armor divisor, I should say, means the amount of which you divide the armor by. So if we go for heavy troopers and we want to create a heavy foot platoon, we could give them ballistic plate, and that appears down here in armor, and we can set the armor. And now, because it's got the E, it means they're encumbered, which means that they can move or that they can fire. But every time that they're shot at, they divide the damage by 2. So that's available, and I can see if I go to fluff, even for units this is like the second succession war code. C means very low tech level, and is available in all areas. Whereas some of this equipment here, like the Federated Suns kit, isn't available until the third point here, which I think the first one is Succession Wars, the second one is Clan Invasion, the third one is Civil War, and the fourth one is Dark Age. I think they've changed them. I think there might even be 5 now in some products. So each of these has got a year of introduction. You can actually see the year of introduction here. But if you're not interested in that and you're just interested in the stats, then really you've got a choice mainly between either having a damage divisor of 1 or a damage divisor of 2 but being encumbered. There are some special kits though here which are really interesting. We can actually add sneak suits. Now sneak suits affect the game and modifiers quite a bit, especially if using different senses. You've got camo, sneak suit, camo plus ECM, camo plus IR, or everything camo, IR, and ECM. And then you're just ECM on its own. So there are 6 versions because there are 6 combinations of the 3 things you can have. The top sneak suit though is this one, the camo, infrared, and ECM. And again, it only has a damage divisor of 1, but it does give you lots of modifiers to be hit. And that's in the Total Warfare rule set. You can see that. Specializations we'll do next. So specializations is in TACOps Advanced Units and Equipment, and it's something really worth reading through. I'll go through them briefly. Bridge building engineers, particularly for scenarios where you're repairing bridges. Demolition engineers, blowing things up. Firefighting engineers, probably not used that much, but firefighting equipment. Sappers, minesweeping engineers, again can remove mines. Again, the rules are in TACOps Advanced Rules for that one in the minefield section. Sentry engineers can lay sensor grids. Trench work engineers can dig holes, and you can in 3 turns you can make an improved position which you can park a tank in. Marines are quite often used. Marines are space troops, basically, not Marines as in currently what we have, but Marines that are trained for 0G. Mountain troops have got extra climbing equipment and have a limitation to the number of squads they can have. Some of them, you'll see, have got a limitation to the number of squads they have in a platoon. Paramedics are the odd one. So paramedics don't act like the other troops. They basically replace support troops. So support troops are normally your machine guns and your heavy machine guns, etc. But if you replace them with paramedics, your paramedics get you extra chances of your troopers surviving after being shot if you're using the campaign operation rules. So you can have corpsmen, as they call them, so these paramedics alongside. But that cuts down the amount of weapons fire you use, because essentially these guys are running around healing people. Paratroopers, of course, parachute in. Tag troopers, a bit more advanced here, the ones that specifically carry handheld tag units, so it's not considered a weapon, you have a special kit specialization. And xenoplanetary conditions trained troops, which are basically guys in environmentally sealed armor that can go on vacuum, they can go on tainted atmosphere worlds, etc. And so you can choose one of these specializations here. So Marines is the easiest, so because Marines doesn't actually change much other than the cost. And you can say that they've got zero tree training. So I can actually make our platoon, our foot rifle platoon here, a platoon of Marines. So those are the two basic ones for armor and specialization. So adding armor, adding specializations. Again, there's lots of information about specializations in TAC Ops Advanced units and equipment. We're next going to look at field guns. Now, of course, field guns can't be applied to foot or jump. Okay, it has to be applied to either motorized or mechanized. And also I should actually take that bit to segue into talking about the different motive types that are now available. So we've still got foot, jump and motorized, but we also now have mechanized VTOL microlight, so microcopter, microlight, scuba, foot, scuba motorized with little kind of James Bond style submarines, and mini submarine ones. So the little kind of, I can't remember what they're called actually, little handheld things with propellers. So you've got all sorts of different things. My particular favourite are the ones in the microlights. So again, the only ones that can tow infantry are not the microlights, no, are the motorised, and any of these three mechanised can tow field guns. So if I take, for instance, a motorised troop, and we'll put these on motorcycles or dirt trucks, and then we can actually tow a field gun. And then we go over to the field gun section, and now we've got typical ballistic weaponry here. So all of these things can be towed and can be set up and used. So when you're towing them, they give you a -1 movement point unless you're in mechanized. So if I add, for instance, an AC5 to click on set field gun, I can have the number of field guns, and I'll explain how it calculates that in a minute. And then you've got the go up to reports, and it tells you you've got the gun here, and you've got the weaponry there for the individual troopers. So that's the how that adds that on. It's also got the movement, that's what I wanted to look at, being reduced to 2 from 3. So motorized reduces the movement by 1 when you're towing a field gun. The number of field guns you can carry per platoon, or tow or use, depends on the tonnage, because to crew them they need the number of crew equal to the tonnage. So the tonnage of an AC5 is 8, so it needs 8 crew, and it tells you the crew here, but basically that's the tonnage of the weapon. And if you've got 28 crew, so 28 divided by 8, well, that gives you 3 with a divisor, but with a remainder, but that means you can have 3 AC5s. You could only have 2 AC10s, you could have 2 AC20 those in field guns, which can be really, really nasty. So that's how many field guns you could carry. Some things are so big that you could only have potentially 1 of them. I think actually if you carried a field Gauss rifle, that would be only 1 in a 28-man platoon, because you need 15 people to crew it, and then you have some left over. So that's how you work out the number of field guns. And they all are effectively towed along. And again, field guns can't be fired on when you're moving. You can either fire them or you can move. So you can move and then you can fire, and they have to have a facing. So when you basically set them up, they take 1 turn to change facing. So you set them up in the facing you want, and then you spend 1 turn to change facing, but you can't change facing and fire in the same turn, because they're being pushed around by the troopers in the old-fashioned kind of cannon style. When it gets to field artillery, it's slightly different, because artillery pieces are even bigger than field guns. One thing to look at, though, I think mechanized tracked don't get the -1, if I remember. Oh no, they still get the -1, so they've got a movement 2 too. So everything that's towing weapons gets a -1 movement. And you can't tow with mechanized hover. That doesn't work. So the next one we're going to look at is then the artillery, and also artillery cannons. They come under the same thing. So artillery is even harder to tow. Everything gets reduced to a movement cost of 1. So if you want to tow an Arrow 4 missile launcher, and you're using, say, a mechanized tracked, and the mechanized tracked is going to have 4 and 7, which is the standard size. And I set the field gun to Arrow 4. I can only carry 1 because it's got a crew of 15. And if I go to reports, you can see I've only got a movement of 1. So it doesn't matter what your movement is before, your movement gets reduced to 1. There are no rules in the game for leaving behind the field weapons, but I kind of always, when I'm doing games with field weapons, have a house rule that at any time the infantry platoon can abandon the field guns and then just resume their normal movement, which is perfectly sensible, I think, but it's not actually written anywhere. The biggest one, Long Tom, you can't actually tow a Long Tom unless you actually create a specialized unit with 4 squads of, or I don't know what it would be, 2 squads of 15 or something like that, or somehow you work out divider. It'd be 4 squads of 5. That's how you do it, and that's not a standard infantry unit. But if you're making up your own stuff, you could make that up and have some infantry that are moving along a Long Tom. When your infantry take damage, if their number of people ever falls below the number required to crew the weapon, they can no longer crew the weapon. So if I've got 28 troops and I lose 14 of them, so I've only got 14 left, I can no longer crew the Arrow 4. Also, weirdly enough, the other crew that left over can't do anything. And again, I've kind of house ruled this to say that if you've got 15 people on the Arrow 4 missile, I kind of allow the other 8 people to basically make an attack as if they were an 8-member crew. Again, that makes the game a bit more complicated. It is a house rule, but again, perfectly sensible. Just adds a level of complexity. Means that the troops aren't just standing around doing nothing. So that's field guns and field artillery. Very easy to add. And very effective in the game. One last thing to say is they only carry a 1 ton of ammunition around with them, so in their movement, in their kind of carriages. Again, another kind of situational house rule. You could rule that there could be somewhere where there is a pile of ammunition in a prepared position, that if they stay there, that they can use the ammunition there, but only if they move that they can't use the ammunition. The last area, which I'm not going to look at in detail just yet because it really is experimental technology, is to look at augmentation. And augmentation rules, I'm not sure if they're really fully supported within Mega Mech Lab, and they really require you to go to get interstellar operations, advanced, what's it called, alternate errors, which will describe in detail how you go about making some of the augmented troops of the Mani Domine, etc., and all the different things they involve. So one of the most advanced things you can do there, but they have very, very complicated rules for how they work. So just the last thing, we're going to just run through and make a very advanced troop here. We're going to make this a mechanized platoon. So I'm going to put this as a Z because that's the American spelling. we're going to have a mechanized platoon, and the mechanized platoon is going to have support machine guns plus arrow 4. So we're going to make it tracked. So actually I should change the name here, mechanized tracked. And we're going to set to standard squad size, so squads of 4. It's 4 squads, sorry, of 7. We're going to make the primary weapon different. So the primary weapon is going to be our federated Barrett. We're going to set the secondary weapon to be the support machine gun, and since these are mounted on the like little tanks, the little 5-ton tanks, they don't affect the movement. So support machine guns and secondary, set 2 of those. We've got the field gun set as arrow 4, and that's done in map sheets, of course, this range. And then finally, as the armor kit, we're going to set their armor kit to be the Federated Sons armor kit here. Again, there's more information about that in a time of war, but the basic rules are it's got a divisor of 2 and it's encumbering, which the encumbering doesn't affect them because they're motorized. So this is essentially one of the most advanced little infantry units here, and I'll also say that they are Marines as well. So I'm going to just show the unit report here. So they have a damage per trooper of 0.697. They've got 2 support machine guns. They've got a field gun of an arrow 4, which has a crew. It doesn't say the crew there, but has a crew of 15. They've only got a movement of 1. And if I call up the sheet, if I do export to PDF, current unit, name becomes a bit long. Here we go. So this is our arrow 4 support unit. Can go up to 20 damage with 28 troopers. It's got a range up to 6. It's got a weight of 43.4.5 tons because about 20 tons of that is the little tanks, and the rest is the arrow 4 system being towed. It's mechanized tracked. It's only got a movement of 1. And again, you could house rule it that they could leave behind the arrow launcher and go back up to a movement of 3. It's got a base BV of 350. So very, very nice, quite advanced and quite powerful little infantry unit there. One thing I haven't mentioned is anti-mech training. So I'm just going to reset this thing to look at anti-mech training. That's not what I want to do. I'm just going to open this again, and we're not going to save it, and let's just open that again because that's the quickest way. Okay, I forgot I could have just gone. I don't think you can go new unit in here for some reason. Anti-mech training here affects the troops in 2 ways. The first way is that if you don't have this ticked, then you can't make anti-mech attacks. The second way is the anti-mech skill. So normally troopers have 2 skills. They have gunnery and they have an anti-mech skill instead of piloting. The anti-mech skill, if you take that off, for foot infantry and jump infantry is set to 8 and it can't change. Now this confuses some people. So for instance, if you're doing a foot platoon, it's going to have a base BV of in this case 77, but in reality its BV is going to be calculated looking at the gunnery 4 piloting skill 8, or in this case anti-mech skill 8 column, and it means it's only going to be about 69 because you apply the 0.85 modifier list on the table that you would use for altering skills. If it's a unit that can't do anti-mech attacks, so a motorized or a mechanized unit, then you set the anti-mech skill to 6, even though it doesn't have an anti-mech skill. Or is it set it to 5? I think you might set it to 5, even though it doesn't have an anti-mech skill. So it basically gets set to that, but it can't be used because you can't have tanks climbing up mechs and putting explosives on them. So anti-mech training is important. The other way actually anti-mech training changes it is it changes the mass. So you can see here the tons are currently 2.5 tons for a foot platoon. If I add the anti-mech training, it increases it to 3 tons because that increases the kit weighs, I can't remember the exact value, but it weighs a certain amount of kilograms per trooper that you have to add on. Lastly, it doubles the BV cost of their primary attack, so that causes the overall BV cost to go up. So there is an extra cost for anti-mech training. So if you're creating units of anti-mech training, it's worth sticking them into Mega Mech Lab and then working out what they would come out as, and then remembering only if you've got anti-mech training can you change the anti-mech skill to anything other than an 8. So last of all, if I go to unit spec current report, I can see I've got that there. It doesn't list the anti-mech attack on this report. But if I go to BV breakdown, and this is getting a bit more complicated, you can actually see how it breaks down the cost of the BV. And you've got a defensive modifier. I won't go through all of this, an offensive modifier. And then you have to double it, this offensive modifier, for the fact that that they are anti-mech. So the anti-mech infantry basically doubles this. It then gets modified by the speed of the unit. In this case, a speed factor 1 is a 0.54 modifier. And then you get an overall final battle value rounded. And then that, after you've got that, you need to apply, that's for a 4-5 trooper, and you need to apply that extra rules to that. So this is quite useful for actually just showing you how the battle value is calculated. It works it out all correctly. There is some issue, weirdly, with the master unit list. Usually we say the master unit list is right at all times, but when it comes to infantry, the master unit list is I don't know if it's been updated, but it's a bit of an issue. It only has a couple of different types of infantry on there, and they're not always calculated exactly correctly. So it's well worth chucking them in here. Again, infantry on all these different configurations aren't technically considered to be canon units because they're customized units, but if you're doing a scenario and you're getting together people and designing it, then it's up to you how you do these. But if you're doing a scenario where you're turning up to an event and they allow infantry, then it's best just picking the infantry that are in Total Warfare, which you can find again just by going to load from cache and setting that to standard, that to infantry, and also then changing the rules level to standard as well, because at the moment we've got some advanced rules here. So that's more or less it. The last thing I'll mention is in the advanced rules you can do squads. Now this is quite complicated, that you would have to have like 2 different sheets in a way at hand, but in the advanced rules, in TAC Ops advanced rules, you can say that at any point your platoon could split into 4 separate squads, and those separate squads can then go off and act independently. And if you were ever at the size of 1 squad, then because there's so few troopers in there, they get a +1 to be hit, but they act as 1 unit in terms of initiative. One last thing to say about infantry. Infantry can be a bit of a negative play experience if you've got lots of infantry and you're using the standard rules for initiative, because of course they'll act as infantry sinks. Your opponent can basically move all his infantry first and then move all his mechs last, and it kind of breaks the initiative system unless both groups have the same number of units. There are different ways to go about changing that. Some of them can and some of them proper rules, some of them not. The house rule is that infantry move separately and basically move in a separate phase. You could say all infantry move last, so basically you'll have an initiative where all of your mechs and vehicles move, and then you'll have an infantry phase where all of the infantry move. That gives infantry a slight advantage and makes them more useful. The other way is to use the infantry, the initiative by formation rules, which you can actually find in the initiative deck in a little booklet, but there's also a kind of a copy of it, of how it works on my blog, where you basically every time you have an initiative action, you have to move one unit from each formation. So one unit from a lance of mechs and one unit from a company of 4 platoons of infantry. And that helps to mitigate infantry, because otherwise infantry can be quite a negative experience because of the way they fit into the initiative system. So that's infantry and how to construct using advanced rules. So we've done basic rules, and in the next videos, which we'll do probably next week, we'll be looking at showing you how they work in MegaMech and how we can actually use them in battles, and some tactics and some ideas for using them in scenarios. Until next time, goodbye.